Texas is one of the most exciting teams going into 2024. Fresh off a loss in the college football playoff to Washington, who eventually lost to Michigan, a game that really came down to the wire. It looked like there for a second in that Fiesta Bowl. It looked like they were about to win the dang thing. I mean, they marched down the field and couldn't get it done. Washington wins the game. Texas now has lost some pretty serious talent and then reloaded in some other areas. So I'm interested to talk some deficiencies in this roster as we know it now. I mean, we haven't even been through spring practice. We don't know. We don't know exactly. You know, the ins and outs of every position for every team yet, obviously, but we can project some things. So as we put the Texas schedule there up on the screen, one of my biggest concerns for these new teams coming into the SEC was line of scrimmage. Texas was a team last year that actually allowed a pretty good number of sacks. The offensive line was good at times, not great ever. I don't think it was ever really great. This year, Texas will be returning 4 out of 5 starters on that offensive line. I think that's a big deal. I think they need to continue to bulk up some, but returning 4 out of 5 guys on the O-line, O-line is one of those positions that you will continue to grow throughout your career in college. And if you're just in your first or second year, especially in a Steve Sarkisian system, you're going to struggle. So I fully expect this offensive line to be better this year and protect Quinn Ewers better. Now, with that being said, I've got some questions at the running back position. Wide receiver is not going to be a question. It's just not going to be. Outstanding wide receivers at Texas through the transfer portal and recruiting and all that. They lose some great wide receivers, obviously, in A.D. Mitchell and Worthy, but then they just reload. So I'm not worried about the wide receiver position. Tight end will be another, I think, a little bit of an area of concern. I think when you lose a guy like Jatavian Sanders, you don't just reload at that position and be able to not miss a beat. I mean, that guy was way too good to just pick up where he left off. So I suspect that running back will be something that we need to keep an eye on in the spring, and I suspect tight end as well. And on defense, I think the back end of this defense got a lot better this offseason just by talent acquisition and just by getting more experience. But the defensive line, without a doubt, is without a doubt taking a step back. You lose Byron Murphy and you lose Sweat off of that defensive line. Now, I don't care what college football team you are, how good you recruited, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough to replace those guys, man. So who's got to step up? I think that there's a few really, really important players on this team that have got to step up. We talked about that offensive line. Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams, Kevin Banks and Cam Williams are 2 guys on that offensive line that are going to have to step up. Cam Williams has got to get bigger and more physical. Okay. If those 2 guys do what they need to do on the offensive line, we're going to see some improvement in those sack numbers. We're going to see improvement in the run game, all that good stuff. And then we got a guy named Sadir Mitchell that's going to be playing defensive tackle. We just talked about the shoes that he has to fill for this team. And it's I think a little bit unrealistic to say that the defensive line for Texas is going to be as good as it was last year. I don't think anybody can say that in their right mind. But with all that being said, I like the cornerback position. I like the safety position for this team. The linebacker position I think they bulked up and they got more numbers of good players and just overall better players at linebacker. So I think this is going to be more of a bend don't break style defense. I think you're going to be able to run the football on Texas a little bit, but I think that it's going to be a little tougher to throw the ball down the field on them. So with all that being said, what are your kind of initial thoughts before we head into spring on Texas, and then you want to take us through the schedule?
Yeah, you know, later on in this off season after spring training, I just want to kind of pitch this for everybody. We will be doing our breakdowns of every single team. We'll be doing a deep dive for ourselves to understand what to expect from these teams heading into the 2024 season. We have not done that yet. It's a little bit too early to do that, but we're going to have previews of each team at least in the top 25 and some outside of that. We can only do so many, but Texas is certainly going to be on that list of teams that we break down, and I'm excited to do that. Heading into next season, I think you hit on a lot of key points. My biggest question is Texas going to replicate what they did last year um, and be a top 4 team by the end of the year, right? It's tough to do, and it was a lot easier with that defensive line that they had to stop the run. But if you'll remember, Texas was in a lot of close games last year in the Big 12. It was not pretty in some of those games. They had some pretty close, fourth quarter games against teams that they had no business being on the field on the same field as. So I think heading into the SEC, you're going. I'm going to have that question for them for sure, heading into the SEC, playing a more difficult schedule, undoubtedly, than what they faced in the Big 12. Not that all the Big 12 teams are bad. I'm not saying that it's not a good conference. It is, but undoubtedly they are going to have a tougher schedule this year than they had last year, and we can go line by line and check that. But
You said it now. You're going to be arguing with those Big 12 fans now, dude.
it is what it is.
They've been on my ass all week, dude.
Yep. Well, that's what
How dare
happens.
me?
That's what happens when you talk about the Big 12 and how uncompetitive they are, Um, but anyways, back to Texas. So looking at this schedule, the first one that jumps out on the page obviously is Michigan. That's going to be one of the biggest games of the year. I am so excited to watch that game. I'm so excited to break that game down, talk about it. But what's interesting, you mentioned their passing defense. Hopefully, it's gotten better. It looks like it has, but they are not going to be tested until probably Oklahoma, right? So they're going to have 5 games and a bye week to figure themselves out in their secondary. I don't see any other team on here that's going to really stretch the ball downfield. I don't think Michigan is going to just all of a sudden be that team, with probably Alex Orji playing quarterback. So that's good. That fits what they want. That fits what Texas wants. They want to work the kinks out, get their new players in, and figure a lot of this stuff out. But they are going to get tested on that defensive front against Michigan, and that is going to be interesting. I don't think Michigan will be as dominant of a running team as they were last year, but they're still going to be pretty dang good. So I think that you're going to answer some questions for me there against Michigan. And then really you've got Oklahoma and Georgia, and then basically 2 bye weeks, a third probably if Billy Napier's gone at Florida at this point. And then Arkansas should be a winnable game. Kentucky should be winnable. Texas A&M, maybe we got a good rivalry kind of coming back that, in a rivalry game in Mike Elko's last game of his first year, as head coach of Texas A&M. Maybe we've got a pretty competitive game there at the end. Maybe Texas A&M is playing spoiler at the end of the year, so that could be a really fun game to watch. But of this list, Mark, I mean, it seems like a pretty navigatable schedule, right? You get Georgia at home, which is really important. That's going to be a tough game. Like that to me is a coin flip game, right? Especially because Texas is going to be playing at home. But is there a certain team on this schedule that you look at, a certain game, and you say, there's a trap game? That's a team that could upset Texas and ruin their chances of being a Final Four team in this playoff.
Yeah. Yeah, exciting schedule here. I mean, just the proposition of a big blue blood like Texas coming in the SEC is obviously exciting, and this schedule definitely puts you on the edge of your seat.
But is there, like, if you look at this schedule, is there one team that you look at and say, all right, Texas probably shouldn't lose to that game, but they might, because, is there something like
Absolutely.
that sticks out to you, like one team in particular?
Well, absolutely. Oklahoma. They lost to Oklahoma last year. Shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma had no business winning that football game, but that's what neutral site rivalry games can give you. Um, you know, and in the SEC, you just don't know that game against Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
That is a trap game if I've ever seen one. You're coming off of a road game at Arkansas, which you never go play at, and then you're gonna have to play Kentucky at home, and then go on the road the very next week to play Texas A&M. That's a busy last 3 weeks of that schedule. So, and especially if you're sitting there thinking about, say Texas only has one loss, or even say they have no losses even. Think about the pressure that's going to be built up on this Texas team coming down to those last couple of games. So yeah, absolutely. There are some games that can jump up and bite the Texas Longhorns. And you just said it. There were close games last year that Texas had no business making a game with some of these teams. Okay. So who's to say that Florida doesn't put it together one week?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Who's to say that Vandy doesn't? No, I'm just kidding. Not me. I ain't going to do you like that, Texas Longhorns fans. I'm just kidding. Y'all going to beat the shit out of Vandy. But you get my point. There are lots of trip up points throughout an SEC schedule for every single team.
Yeah.
It's there's going to be all kinds of trap games in store, and it's always the games that you're not expecting, or the weeks you're not expecting there to be any crazy games like that, and then it's like, whoa, everybody in the top 10 won by 7 points or less this week, and it's like, yeah, because nobody was putting their focus on this week. Everybody's thinking about the next week, and that's kind of the beauty, the ugly beautifulness of college football, right? It's an imperfect sport. It's 18 to 21-year-old dudes out there that don't all have their head on all the way, just like most 18 to 21-year-olds don't. So yeah, there's lots of room for error.